Yeah, another recent unfortunate event that everybody knows about now are the shootings in Florida at the schoolhouse, which is terrible. I mean, my gosh, we never had that in my generation, for better or worse, and I'm not saying that we're all that much better, but we simply never had anything like that in my day. But I think one of the reasons for it is, and you get to the bottom line here, um, is that the system breeds this because they don't teach people, they keep them ignorant, and they keep them in a state of affairs where they have to beg the government for goodies and beg them for permission to do just about anything except breathe these days. You need a license for this, a license for that, when you don't need any of it. So therefore, there's no sense of power, there's no sense of self-esteem. And in my generation, we actually thought for the most part we would do better than our parents. And that had been historically true up through the baby boomer generation. I think that's long since out the window. And some of the more perceptive young people who see that, who might not know all of the reasons I'm telling you about now, overtly understand it, get that they're in a position where they're basically going to be slaves for the next 50 years of their lives. They're going to have nothing for a retirement when they get to retirement age. And a quickie on that, by the way, the Supreme Court has ruled that there are no entitlement to social insecurity benefits. That's a subject for another day, but trust me, they've already ruled that. So if you see all this in the cards and you know that your life isn't going to be a very good one, and there'll be little, if any, chance to get ahead, that's the problem. And you have a government that, in effect, when they say that a taxpayer, quote unquote, has a zero interest in his time and labor, and that's exactly what the IRS says, is that they don't respect human rights. They think they own you and that you are slaves. Now, in that case, the mindset of a young shooter might well be, well, if that's true, then if human value has no life, then where is the crime in taking human life? I don't see it from their point of view, mind you. And that's a tough one to deal with. Certainly you're guilty of crimes, there's no question about that. The other problem the system has is they don't have any judicial courts in which to try criminals like this. That's what my 7-month vacation in South Carolina was all about. We'll get to that another time. But underlying the philosophy underneath, this is the real deal here, is that there's very little chance for anybody to get ahead. It's getting worse by the decade. More government regulations, more this, more that. And this is what leads to this kind of thinking. Or in the cases of parents that if they have children end up, killing their children because they don't want to subject them to a life like this. This is a very similar train of thought. And I don't know how much serious psychological work has been done in this area. But truth be known, I'm willing to bet you a lot of these shootings have a lot of similar features. Not all of them will, of course, but I think a great number of them will, and that's what needs to change. Now, here again, you get into this nonsense with gun control, and I just wish, after 80 years, the NRA would get it right, for crying out loud. It isn't a Second Amendment issue. It hasn't been since Preston, Illinois in 1886. Not only that, any serious constitutional scholar knows the Bill of Rights doesn't apply to the states. So what in the world is the NRA doing making arguments like this? Specious, frivolous, and without merit, but to generate a lot of support. They get a lot of members paying them good money to do nothing. I mean, this is almost as bad as the people that advocate civil rights, even the ones that believe in what they're doing. Much less the ones that know better and are making, money and power on the backs of their own people. That's another story for another day. But all of that said, this is terribly sad that you have shootings like this and that they occur frequently these days. Not just a one-time deal. So what we do about that ultimately, I'll have more to say about when I do some more research myself. But without any governments in existence, it's hard to create any laws that'll take care of the problem. So that said, we move on to another current events issue. And it is and it isn't, because you get people, in fact now Trump is being called on the carpet by his own Republican Party for the executive orders I've referred to earlier. But I have not heard anyone mention the real nature of the problem, which is And if you're ready for this, and I call this as simple as 1, 2, 3, where I come from, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 of the Constitution, and it defines the ratio of representation we should have in Congress. It was set and it remains fixed at a maximum of 30,000 people for one representative. Now think about that a minute, 30,000. Now we have a population now of over 300 million. So if you do the math, you come out plain simple math, second grader can do it, that we have 435 members in the House of Representatives when we should have over 15,000 of them. That's a real problem, because what they're saying is we can run this government and in effect enact whatever we want with barely more than 2% of the people supposedly being represented in Congress voting for something. 2%. That's not representative government. Now, I'll grant you we've had some improvements over the last 200 years in communications and this, that, and the other. But even if we assume that the representation could be amended and say up to 90 or even 100,000 per representative, even if you do that, we're still looking at somewhere around 9 to 10,000 in Congress. And that's not even close. In fact, if you do the math today, you're going to find out that we have one representative per about 800,000 residents. 800,000. And it's supposed to be 30. Can you explain this? And this is a great constitutional attack on every statute that Congress enacts, and probably is true in your state, quote-unquote state too. For example, in California, we have 80 members of the California Assembly, and we have over 40 million people here. You do the math, that comes out to 500,000. Not as offensive as what they do in Washington, D.C., but you can see that's hardly a representative government either. And oh, by the way, that would be just as true even if the government adhered to the original intent of the Constitution, and everyone knows they don't come anywhere close to doing it, and they think they have unfettered, uncontrolled power over every aspect of the lives of all Americans. This is what has to stop, and raising issues like this is going to do it. I don't know how they get around. This is simple math. Even Matthew Peterson, for crying out loud, would get this one. And if you don't get the joke there, look at his video on YouTube of his Senate hearing to be confirmed as a judge in the District Court of the District of Columbia, which might even be a judicial court. All the rest of them aren't. The subject matter for another day. But this guy was so bad he couldn't identify a motion in limine, had no familiarity with the federal rules of civil procedure. He was so bad he couldn't answer questions from his own Republican constituents, and he was forced to withdraw his name before the Donald could fire him. Is this really what they teach in law schools these days? Wow. And I don't know where he went to law school. My money would be on Harvard, but that's just me personally. But if they don't teach, wow, that's an astounding amount of ignorance. And yet I've run into more than my share in the course of 4 decades, particularly in South Carolina. But it's even getting worse in other jurisdictions. And oh, by the way, people, I'll keep you up to date on this. I'm under coast-to-coast attack now and being threatened with practicing law without a license. I just recently got some mail. I haven't opened it yet. Most of it might not be because not properly addressed. Comes with the zip code. So you get mail like that officially from any government agency. What I do is I send it back unopened, and I write on there in red ink, jurisdiction and venue denied. Because with the zip code, they're trying to find you not in a state judicial district, but in effect in the District of Columbia. And that, by the way, is where the income tax and the zip code are valid. Only there, and maybe the Mariana Islands. But that said, I'm coast to coast, practicing law without license, and yet the first thing I say in my letter is I'm invoking my unlimited power to contract to assist my friend to invoke his right to invoke the judicial power of the United States, and also to assist him to prepare a writ of habeas corpus which can't be suspended except in times of rebellion or invasion. This is a big safety hatch for us and an escape, because state of emergency here does not matter. It has to be a state of rebellion or invasion, and as far as I know, we haven't had one of those in 150 years. By the way, a quickie on that with states of emergency is that Congress in 1861, at the outset of the war between the states, declared it was not a war of conquest. And it wasn't. It was a rebellion. Later on comes the 39 Congress in 1867, after the war is over, and they decide opposite, and that's where all the trouble starts. The Civil Rights Act of 1866, the Reconstruction Act of 1867, the 14th Amendment, and the admission of West Virginia, by the way, and that bastard Thad Stevens from Pennsylvania, who was the head of the House of Representatives as far as the radical Republicans, actually admitted on the record that West Virginia was admitted into the Union under the war power. And every state since then has been admitted under the war power. Okay, we'll follow up here in a little bit. Thank you.